My mom sold me for $50, so I sent her to jail. Years later, she's back, claiming I owe her another chance. I was 9 years old when I gave my mom her first piggyback ride because she was passed out on the sidewalk near our home, drunk out of her mind. "Is mommy dead?" was the first thing my younger brother asked when we walked in the door. I told him no, and that she was just resting after getting too much fresh air. He was only 5 years younger than me, but it felt like 10, because I was the one who taught him how to read, how to trace letters, how to roll his R's, and whenever our mom wasn't around, which was 95% of the time, I distracted him with cartoons and making shapes with shadows against the wall. I was 12 when I got my first babysitting job and was making even more money than my mom, because her earnings were government support and food stamps, and when I came home with a new white t-shirt that I had bought from Goodwill, she slapped the smile straight off my face, over and over again, until I fell to the floor. "I can barely afford to buy my beer, and you think you can come strolling in looking all fancy." I stared at her blankly. This was the first store-bought thing I had owned in years, because the rest of my wardrobe came from the lost and found boxes from nearby homeless shelters. And just when I stood up and got my bearings, she continued, "Get the F out of my home. No son of mine will be a show-off." My mind instantly went to my brother, and when I realized he was still at school, I let out a sigh of relief. And the last thing I wanted was to have my mom still be angry when he came home. So I decided to follow her rules and walked upstairs to pack my belongings. Everything fit into one backpack. As I left, I turned around to see if my mom would change her mind. Spoiler alert, she did not. I didn't even know where to go. I didn't know who my dad was, and I already knew from my mom's friends that all the local homeless shelters were full. I sort of just walked around for a while and let my feet do the navigating. And when the sky turned dark, I took refuge in my favorite playground, the one I always used to go to with Louis. So there I was, 12 years old, sitting on the swings at 11 p.m. when an adult came up to me. It was a woman with a soft voice. Her face was wrinkly like she had smiled a lot in her life. "Why don't you go home?" she asked kindly. I looked her right in the eyes and smiled back without saying a word, as if I ever had one. We ended up talking for a while, and I gave her my address. She took my hand and brought me to her car. Turns out she was a social worker. I thought she would drive me somewhere safe, but instead she drove me back home. When she knocked on the door, Louis answered, and he smiled so brightly it could have lit up the entire street. "Is this your brother?" she asked, her voice completely neutral. But there was a glimmer in her eyes that told me she was paying more attention than she was letting on. That night, I slept hidden under Louis's bed, and when I woke up in the middle of the night, his head was lying on my chest with his tiny arms wrapped around my neck. I stared at his soft face in a deep sleep, the way his lips curled upwards like he was having a good dream. That's when I knew he had to be protected. And I knew how our mom treated us wasn't okay, but I wanted the problem to go away by itself, and one day it did. Or more specifically, the next morning, because that's when I heard someone banging on the door. My mom opened it, and I instantly recognized the voice. It was the same woman from the park. I crept down the stairs and saw a police officer standing beside her. He had one of those faces that seemed friendly, but looked like it could turn at any second. Luckily, my mom spotted me instantly and dragged me down the stairs at full force, because that was more than enough evidence for the officer to hold her down, while the social worker brought me and my brother into an emergency foster home. The parents basically treated me as a work slave, but it felt like nirvana, because they were treating Louis like he was one of their own, and that's all I wanted for him. In fact, they loved him so much that they wanted to adopt him, and since Louis told them that being housed with me was a non-negotiable, they took me in too. The process was actually extremely easy. Our mom didn't even fight for us because the foster family paid her $50 to terminate her parenting rights to us, and she agreed without hesitation. Update: I'm now 17 and have spent my entire life working and studying. I have around $2,000 in my bank account. The family never really warmed up to me, but luckily Louis got the childhood I never had. Everything was going well until 6 months ago. My mom managed to track down what school I was attending, and I saw her waiting outside when school ended. I always figured she'd make her come back in one way or another, so I just asked her what she wanted. "You owe me," she said with a straight face. But I wasn't the same kid she dragged down the stairs anymore. I was almost an adult, so I told her to F off and just walked home. But that evening when Louis came home from soccer practice, he brought a guest. It was our mother. He told me I owed it to her to give her another chance. I stared at Louis, my heart sinking into my stomach, the way he looked at me with those hopeful eyes, the same ones that used to light up when I'd make shadow puppets on the wall. He genuinely believed we should give her a chance. Our mother stood behind him, and I could see the satisfaction creeping across her face. She'd gotten to him. Somehow, she'd wormed her way into his head and convinced him that she deserved another shot at being our mother. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I told Louis we needed to talk privately, but our mother interrupted, saying anything I had to say could be said in front of her. She was already trying to control the situation. Louis defended her, saying she'd been sober for 3 months and was working on getting her life together. The way he spoke, I could tell he'd been talking to her for a while. This wasn't their first meeting. My foster parents weren't home yet, which meant I had to handle this carefully. I couldn't just kick her out without causing a scene that would upset Louis, so I did what I'd always done. I put Louis first. I agreed to let her stay for dinner, hoping that would be enough to satisfy Louis and get her to leave. But as soon as I said yes, she made herself comfortable on the couch like she belonged there. While I cooked, I watched them interact. Louis showed her his soccer trophies, his report cards, all the things I'd helped him achieve. She nodded and smiled, playing the proud mother role perfectly. It made me sick. During dinner, she started asking questions about our foster family's finances. How big was the house? Did they both work? What kind of cars did they drive? Louis answered innocently, not realizing she was fishing for information. When our foster parents came home, they were shocked to see her there. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Our foster mom's face went pale, and our foster dad's jaw clenched tight. They asked to speak with me privately in the kitchen. They wanted to know why I'd let her in, how she'd found us. I explained about Louis bringing her home, and they exchanged worried looks. They told me she wasn't welcome in their home, that they'd paid for her to stay away. But when we went back to the living room, Louis was showing her his bedroom, completely oblivious to the situation. That night, after she finally left with promises to Louis that she'd see him again soon, I tried to talk to him. I reminded him of all the times she'd hurt us, all the nights we'd gone hungry while she drank, but he just shook his head. He told me I was being unfair, that people could change. He said she'd explained everything, that she'd been sick back then, that she hadn't known how to be a good mother. She'd fed him every excuse in the book, and he'd swallowed them all. Over the next few weeks, she kept showing up, sometimes at his soccer practice, sometimes waiting outside his school. Louis would text her constantly, and I'd catch him sneaking phone calls late at night. Our foster parents tried to intervene, but Louis threatened to run away if they tried to keep him from seeing her. They were stuck. They loved him too much to risk losing him, but they knew how dangerous she was. I started noticing things going missing around the house. Small things at first. A phone charger here, some loose change there, then bigger items. Our foster mom's earrings, our foster dad's watch. One morning, our foster mom confronted me about it. She'd found her missing earrings in my backpack. I was stunned. I had no idea how they'd gotten there, but the look on her face told me she didn't believe me. More items turned up in my room over the following days. Each time I denied taking them, but I could see the trust eroding in their eyes. They'd never fully warmed up to me, and now they had a reason to justify their coldness. Louis started acting different around me too. When I tried to talk to him about our mother, he'd get defensive. He'd accuse me of being jealous that she wanted a relationship with him. He said I was trying to sabotage their reunion because I was bitter. I knew our mother was behind the thefts, but I had no proof. She was too smart to leave fingerprints, too careful to get caught in the act. She was systematically destroying my credibility, and it was working. One evening, I overheard her on the phone in our backyard. She'd been drinking. I could hear it in her voice. She was bragging to someone about how easy it was to manipulate Louis, how the foster family had money, how she was going to get a nice payday out of this. I quickly grabbed my phone and started recording. This was the evidence I needed. She went on about her plan, how she was framing me for the thefts, how once I was out of the picture, she'd have full access to Louis and could work on getting money from the foster family. But just as I was about to stop recording, she spotted me through the window, her face twisted with rage, and she stormed inside. Before I could react, she'd grabbed my phone and smashed it against the wall. She leaned in close, her breath reeking of alcohol, and whispered that if I tried anything like that again, she'd tell everyone I'd been stealing from the family and had attacked her when she confronted me about it. She had scratches on her arms, self-inflicted, I realized, to back up her story. I was trapped. Our foster parents already suspected me of theft, and now my only evidence was destroyed. Louis barely spoke to me anymore, convinced I was the villain in this story. The situation escalated when our foster parents installed a lock on their bedroom door. They didn't say it was because of me, but I knew. The message was clear. I wasn't trusted in their home anymore. Our mother's visits became more frequent. She'd show up for dinner, always when our foster parents were working late. She'd fill Louis's head with stories about how we could be a real family again, how she had a place lined up for us to live together. I tried one last time to reach Louis. I showed him our old apartment building, reminded him of the nights we'd gone without food, the times I'd had to carry her home, but he just accused me of living in the past, of not believing people could change. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Louis had a big soccer match, the championship game for his league. Our foster parents were both there, along with dozens of other families. Our mother showed up too, already stumbling slightly. She'd been drinking more than usual, probably nervous about being around so many people. She tried to play it off, but I could see the signs, the way she swayed slightly, the too loud laugh, the glassy eyes. During halftime, she approached me near the concession stand. She started her usual routine, telling me I was ruining everything, that I needed to stop poisoning Louis against her. But this time, I didn't back down. I told her loudly that I knew what she was doing, that I knew about the stealing, the manipulation, the lies. People started to stare, but I didn't care. I was done being silent. She tried to quiet me down, but I kept going. I told her she'd never change, that she was the same selfish Hammerd who'd chosen beer over her own children. That's when she snapped. She lunged at me, screaming obscenities. Her fist connected with my jaw before several parents pulled her off. She was wild, thrashing and yelling about how I'd ruined her life, how I owed her for all the years she'd wasted raising me. Louis saw the whole thing. The look on his face as he watched our mother being restrained by strangers, mascara running down her face as she screamed threats at me. It was like watching him wake up from a dream. When she saw Louis staring at her, she tried to compose herself. She reached for him, telling him we needed to leave, that these people didn't understand their love. She actually tried to grab his arm and pull him away from the field, but Louis stepped back. For the first time in months, he stepped away from her instead of toward her. She grabbed for him again, more desperately this time, and that's when one of the other parents intervened. The woman who stepped in happened to be a family counselor who worked with troubled youth. She'd been watching our family dynamics for weeks at the games, she later told us. She positioned herself between Louis and our mother, speaking calmly but firmly. Our mother completely lost it. She shoved the counselor and made another grab for Louis, screaming that he was her son and she had rights. Someone called the police while other parents formed a protective circle around Louis. When the officers arrived, our mother was still ranting. She told them I'd assaulted her, that I was a thief and a liar, but dozens of witnesses had seen her attack me, had heard her threats, had watched her try to forcibly take Louis. The counselor pulled our foster parents aside while the police dealt with our mother. She explained what she'd observed, how she'd seen the signs of manipulation and parental alienation. She offered to provide a statement and help our family access resources. Our foster parents looked stunned. They turned to me with expressions I'd never seen before, genuine remorse mixed with understanding. Our foster mom actually had tears in her eyes as she apologized for doubting me. The police arrested our mother for assault and attempted kidnapping. As they led her away in handcuffs, she was still screaming about how we owed her, how she'd make us pay, but her words had lost their power. Louis broke down crying. He kept apologizing, saying he should have listened to me, should have remembered what she was really like. I held him the same way I had when he was 5, telling him it wasn't his fault. That night, our foster family had the first real conversation we'd ever had. They admitted they'd been unfair to me, that they'd let their initial impressions cloud their judgment. They'd seen me as a burden that came with the child they really wanted, and they were ashamed of that. Our foster dad actually cried when he apologized. He said watching me stand up to our mother, seeing how I'd protected Louis even when everyone was against me, it had shown him who I really was. He called me a hero, said he was proud to have me as a son. The counselor from the soccer game connected us with a family therapist who specialized in cases like ours. Through those sessions, Louis finally understood the full extent of what our mother had done, not just recently, but throughout our entire childhood. He learned about parentification, about how I'd been forced to become his parent when I was just a child myself. He cried when he realized how much I'd sacrificed for him, how I'd given up my childhood so he could have one. Our mother was sentenced to 6 months in jail and a restraining order that prevented her from contacting us. We heard she'd tried to convince her lawyer that we'd stolen her parental rights, that the $50 wasn't enough. The judge wasn't sympathetic. Our foster family changed after that. They included me in everything, treated me like an actual son instead of an obligation. They even started a college fund for me, saying it was the least they could do after everything I'd been through. Louis and I grew closer than ever. He started introducing me as his hero instead of just his brother. He'd tell anyone who'd listen about how I'd raised him, protected him, saved him. It was embarrassing, but also healing. On my 18th birthday, our foster parents surprised me with adoption papers. They said they knew I was technically an adult, but they wanted to make it official. I was their son, and they were proud of me. I cried harder than I had in years. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a real family. Not just Louis, who I'd always protect, but parents who saw me, valued me, and loved me for who I was. Our mother got out of jail eventually, but she never contacted us again. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved to another state, probably running the same cons on other people, but she couldn't hurt us anymore. Looking back, I realized that her return was actually a gift. It forced our family to confront the dynamics we'd been living with, to address the walls we'd built. It showed Louis the truth he needed to see, and it showed our foster parents the son they'd been overlooking. I still have the $2,000 I'd saved up, plus more now from my part-time job, but I don't need it for escape anymore. Now I'm saving for college, for a future I can actually envision. Louis plays soccer in high school now, and I never miss a game. Our parents, our real parents, the ones who chose us and fought for us, are always there too. We cheer together, a real family united by choice rather than blood. Sometimes I think about that 9-year-old boy carrying his hammered mother home, trying to protect his baby brother from the truth. I wish I could tell him that it would all be worth it, that every sacrifice would lead to something beautiful, but I think somehow he already knew. That's why he kept going, kept fighting, kept protecting, because real love isn't about what you're owed, it's about what you're willing to give. And in the end, that love came back to me tenfold. The silence that followed her departure was deafening. Louis sat across from me at the kitchen table, his eyes still red from crying. Our foster parents had gone to bed, emotionally drained from the evening's confrontation. I could tell Louis wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. I made us both hot chocolate, the way I used to when we were kids. He wrapped his hands around the mug and finally spoke. He told me she'd first approached him 3 months ago at soccer practice. She'd been watching from a distance for weeks before working up the courage to talk to him. She'd told him stories about how she'd been in therapy, how she'd gotten a job at a diner, how she thought about us every day. She showed him pictures she'd kept of us as babies, told him about the songs she used to sing to him, all the memories I'd tried so hard to help him forget. The manipulation had been gradual. First, she just wanted to watch his practices. Then she started bringing him snacks, remembering his favorite foods. She'd cry about how much she missed us, how the foster family had stolen us from her. She painted herself as the victim and me as the one keeping them apart. Louis admitted he'd given her his phone number after the second meeting. She'd text him constantly, sending him old photos, telling him how proud she was. She knew exactly which buttons to push. Every text ended with how much she loved him, how she'd changed, how we could be a family again. I asked him why he hadn't told me. He looked down at his mug and said she'd convinced him I'd try to stop them from reconnecting. She'd told him I was bitter about my childhood, that I couldn't forgive her the way he could. She'd made him believe keeping secrets from me was protecting our relationship. The next morning, our foster parents sat us down for a family meeting. They'd been up most of the night discussing what to do. They wanted to file a restraining order immediately, but they needed both of us on board. Louis hesitated, still caught between the mother he wanted and the mother she actually was. Our foster mom, Patricia, reached across the table and took Louis's hand. She told him about patterns of manipulation, how abusers often target the most vulnerable family members. She wasn't trying to turn him against our mother, she said, but to help him recognize unhealthy patterns. Our foster dad, Robert, shared his own story. His father had been an alcoholic who disappeared when he was 10, only to return years later with promises of change. The cycle of hope and disappointment had nearly destroyed his family. He understood the pull of wanting to believe a parent could change. Louis agreed to the restraining order, but I could see it was culling him. Part of him still hoped she'd prove us all wrong. That weekend, while our foster parents met with their lawyer, Louis barely left his room. I'd hear him crying at night, mourning the mother he'd built up in his mind. Monday came with new challenges. When I got to school, I found my locker had been vandalized. Someone had written "thief" across it in permanent marker. I knew immediately our mother was behind it, but I couldn't prove it. The janitor helped me clean it off, but the damage was done. Word spread quickly. By lunch, I was getting strange looks from classmates. Someone had started a rumor that I'd been stealing from my foster family, that they were planning to kick me out. A few people asked me directly if it was true. I denied it, but rumors have a way of taking on a life of their own. Lewis texted me during his lunch period. Kids at his school were saying similar things. Someone had seen our mother talking to students outside the building, spreading her poison. Even with a restraining order pending, she was finding ways to hurt us. That afternoon, I stayed late at school to work on a project. When I finally headed home, I noticed a car following me. It wasn't our mother's hit-up sedan, but something felt wrong. I took a detour through the park, and the car continued to follow. My heart raced as I picked up my pace. The car pulled up beside me and the window rolled down. It was a man I didn't recognize, rough-looking with bloodshot eyes. He called out my name and said my mother wanted to talk to me, said she had something important to tell me about Lewis. I ran. I cut through backyards and over fences until I was sure I'd lost him. When I got home, I was shaking. Our foster parents called the police immediately, but without a license plate or clear description, there wasn't much they could do. That night, Patricia installed new locks on all the doors and windows. Robert set up a security camera system he'd been meaning to install for months. They tried to make it seem like normal home improvements, but we all knew why they were really doing it. The restraining order was approved 2 days later. Our mother was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from us, our home, and our schools. The judge also prohibited her from contacting us through third parties. It should have made us feel safer, but it only seemed to make her more desperate. The stolen items that had been planted in my room became a bigger issue when our foster parents' insurance company got involved. They needed a police report for the claim, which meant officially documenting the thefts. Even though our foster parents now believed I wasn't responsible, having my name associated with the report was humiliating. Louis started seeing a therapist to process everything. Dr. Martinez specialized in family trauma and manipulation. Louis would come home from sessions emotionally drained, but slowly starting to understand how our mother had groomed him, how she'd used his natural desire for maternal love against him. One session, Dr. Martinez invited me to join. Louis needed to hear directly from me about our childhood, to fill in the gaps our mother had painted over with her lies. I told him about the nights I'd stayed awake making sure she hadn't left cigarettes burning, about the times I'd hidden money so we could eat when she spent everything on alcohol. Louis broke down when I told him about the time she'd locked me outside in the winter because I'd asked her to buy him medicine for his fever. I'd spent the night in the garage, sneaking back in through a window when I heard him crying. He'd been too young to remember, but I'd never forgotten. The harassment continued in subtler ways. Our foster parents started getting calls from collection agencies about debts they didn't owe. Their credit card was mysteriously used at several liquor stores across town. Someone kept signing them up for magazine subscriptions and catalog mailing lists. Then came the social media attacks. Fake profiles started appearing, using our photos and spreading lies about our foster family. One claimed Patricia and Robert were abusing us. Another said they were only fostering us for the money. The profiles tagged local news stations and child welfare organizations. Our foster parents had to hire a lawyer to deal with the false allegations. The stress was taking its toll on everyone. Patricia started having anxiety attacks, and Robert was barely sleeping. I overheard them one night discussing whether they could handle this, whether they were putting their own family at risk. The thought of losing another home because of our mother made me physically sick. I started planning contingencies, researching youth shelters and job opportunities. I couldn't let Louis end up in the system because of her vendetta against me. Louis noticed me pulling away and confronted me about it. When I admitted my fears about our foster parents giving up on us, he got angry, not at me, but at our mother. For the first time, I saw real rage in his eyes. The brother who'd always been gentle and forgiving had reached his limit. He started documenting everything. Every weird phone call, every suspicious car driving by slowly, every new rumor at school. He created a file with dates, times, and descriptions. He said if our mother wanted to play games, we needed to be ready with evidence. The breaking point came during Louis's championship soccer game. Our foster parents had hired security for the event just in case. We thought we were prepared. We weren't. She didn't come herself. She was smarter than that. Instead, she sent the man who'd followed me home. He approached Louis during warm-ups, when the security guard was distracted by a commotion on the other side of the field. A commotion our mother had probably orchestrated. He told Louis his mother was dying, that she was in the hospital and desperately wanted to see him one last time. He said I knew about it, but was keeping it from him out of spite. Louis, caught off guard and in front of his teammates, didn't know how to react. I saw the interaction from the bleachers and immediately ran down. By the time I reached them, the man was trying to convince Louis to come with him right now, that there wasn't much time. Louis looked torn, the old programming kicking in despite everything he'd learned. I grabbed Louis and pulled him away, telling the man to leave immediately, or I'd call the police. He sneered and said our mother just wanted to say goodbye to her baby. Then he leaned in close and whispered something I couldn't hear. Whatever it was made Louis go pale. Security finally noticed the commotion and escorted the man out. Louis was shaking. He told me the man had said our mother had pictures of us from foster care, pictures that could get our foster parents in trouble. He'd implied things that made my stomach turn. We told Patricia and Robert immediately. They were horrified but not surprised. Our mother was escalating, getting more desperate and dangerous. They decided we needed to be more proactive about our safety. The next few weeks were a blur of safety measures. Patricia started driving us to and from school. Robert installed an alarm system. We varied our routes and schedules. It felt like we were living in a prison of our mother's making. Dr. Martinez increased Louis's sessions. The psychological warfare was taking its toll on him. He was having nightmares about our mother taking him away, about losing the family we'd built. He started sleeping in my room again, like when we were little. Our foster parents' marriage was straining under the pressure. I heard them arguing one night about whether they'd made a mistake adopting us. Patricia defended us fiercely, but Robert was worried about their biological daughter, Sarah, who was away at college. What if our mother targeted her next? I considered considered running away. If I disappeared, maybe our mother would follow me and leave Louis and our foster family alone. I even packed a bag and wrote a letter, but Louis found it before I could leave. The betrayal in his eyes when he realized I was planning to abandon him stopped me cold. We had a long talk that night. He made me promise never to leave him, no matter how bad things got. He said we'd survived our mother before, and we'd survive her again, but we had to do it together. He was right, of course. Running would only give her what she wanted, to destroy the family we'd built. The situation reached a crescendo when our mother made her boldest move yet. She showed up at our foster father's workplace, causing a scene in front of his colleagues and clients. She accused him of stealing her children, of turning them against her. Security removed her, but the damage to his professional reputation was done. That evening, our foster parents looked defeated. Robert's boss had suggested he take some time off until the situation was resolved. Patricia's anxiety medication wasn't helping anymore. They loved us, they assured us repeatedly, but they didn't know how much more they could take. I watched the family I'd grown to love crumbling because of one person's vendetta. The woman who'd chosen alcohol over her children now seemed determined to destroy any chance we had at happiness. The rage I'd suppressed for years threatened to boil over. Louis and I made a decision that night. We couldn't keep playing defense. We needed to take control of the situation. We started researching our legal options, looking into harassment charges and civil suits. We documented every incident, built a timeline of her escalating behavior. Our foster parents were touched by our determination to fight back. It seemed to renew their resolve. Patricia said if we could be strong after everything we'd been through, she could be strong too. Robert apologized for wavering and promised we'd get through this as a family. We hired a private investigator to look into our mother's activities. What he found was disturbing. She'd been staying with various men, telling them sob stories about her stolen children. She'd been raising money through online crowdfunding, claiming she needed legal fees to get us back. It was all a scam, of course. The investigator also discovered she'd been in contact with several anti-foster care groups, painting herself as a victim of the system. She'd given interviews to bloggers and podcasters, spreading lies about our foster family. The disinformation campaign was more extensive than we'd realized. Armed with this information, our lawyer filed multiple charges against her: harassment, stalking, fraud, defamation. The list was long. The restraining order violations alone could put her in jail. But she was like a ghost, always one step ahead of being served. The stress was affecting my schoolwork. My grades started slipping, and my guidance counselor called me in for a meeting. When I explained the situation, she was horrified. She connected me with resources and helped me apply for deadline extensions. The school community rallied around us in unexpected ways. Louis's soccer coach organized a fundraiser to help with our legal fees. Parents who'd witnessed our mother's behavior at games wrote statements for our lawyer. The family counselor who'd intervened that day became a regular source of support, checking in on us weekly. Our mother must have realized the community was turning against her. Her tactics shifted. Instead of public confrontations, she focused on psychological warfare. We'd find things moved in our rooms, subtle signs that someone had been there, nothing stolen, just displaced enough to let us know she could get to us. The security cameras never caught anything. She knew where they were and how to avoid them. It was maddening. We'd report each incident, but without proof, the police couldn't do much. They increased patrols in our neighborhood, but she was too clever to get caught. One morning, Louis found a note in his backpack. Just 4 words: "I'm still your mother." He broke down completely. Despite everything, part of him still craved her love, and she knew exactly how to exploit that weakness. The note was in her handwriting, but there were no fingerprints, no way to prove she'd placed it there. Dr. Martinez worked with Louis on understanding trauma bonds. She explained how abusers create psychological dependencies, how the intermittent reinforcement of love and abuse creates an addictive cycle. Louis intellectually understood, but emotionally, he still struggled with the loss of the mother he'd wanted her to be. Our foster family started attending therapy together. It helped, but the strain was evident. Sarah came home from college for a weekend and was shocked by how much her parents had aged in just a few months. She confronted me privately, asking if her family would ever be normal again. I couldn't lie to her. I told her I didn't know, but that I was sorry her family had been dragged into our mess. She surprised me by hugging me and saying I was her brother now, and family stuck together. It was the first time she'd ever called me brother. The investigation into our mother's finances revealed she owed thousands in back rent and had been evicted from multiple apartments. She was essentially homeless, couch surfing, and living off whatever schemes she could run. The investigator warned us that desperate people do desperate things. His warning proved prophetic. One night, we woke to the sound of breaking glass. Someone had thrown a rock through Louis's bedroom window. Attached was a note: "You can't hide from me forever." This time, she'd made a mistake. A neighbor's security camera caught a clear image of her throwing the rock. Finally, we had concrete evidence. The police arrested her the next morning at a motel on the outskirts of town. She was charged with vandalism, violating the restraining order, and stalking. Her bail was set high enough that she couldn't pay it. For the first time in months, we could breathe. But even from jail, she found ways to torment us. She called collect multiple times a day until our foster parents blocked the jail's number. She wrote letters full of guilt trips and manipulation. We gave them to our lawyer unopened, building our case. Her public defender tried to argue she was mentally ill and needed treatment, not incarceration. Our lawyer countered with the months of calculated harassment, the evidence of planning and premeditation. The judge wasn't sympathetic to her sob story. As the trial date approached, Louis struggled with whether to testify. Part of him still felt guilty about sending our mother to prison. Dr. Martinez worked with him on understanding that he wasn't responsible for her choices, that protecting himself wasn't betrayal. I testified first, laying out our entire history: the abuse, the neglect, the night she kicked me out at 12. I showed photos of the vandalized locker, played recordings of the threatening calls. I kept my voice steady, refusing to let her see how much she'd hurt me. Louis Lewis ultimately decided to testify. His testimony was powerful because it showed his journey from believing her lies to recognizing her manipulation. He cried when he described realizing the mother he dreamed of had never existed. Several jurors wiped away tears. Our foster parents testified about the toll her harassment had taken on their family. Patricia described her anxiety attacks. Robert talked about the damage to his career. Sarah flew in from college to describe how her childhood home had become a fortress. The prosecution presented evidence of our mother's pattern of behavior, the fraudulent fundraising, the false allegations, the systematic campaign to destroy our lives. They painted a picture of a woman who saw her children not as people to love, but as possessions to control. Our mother took the stand in her own defense. She cried and played the victim, claiming we'd been brainwashed by our foster family. She said she just wanted her babies back, that a mother's love could never be wrong. It was a performance, but not a convincing one. During cross-examination, the prosecutor systematically destroyed her narrative. They presented evidence of her continued drinking, her failure to maintain employment, her history of choosing alcohol over her children. When confronted with the note saying, "I owed her," she couldn't explain what a child could possibly owe an abusive parent. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison with mandatory psychological treatment. She screamed as they led her away, saying we'd regret this, that she'd never stop fighting for us. But her threats felt hollow now. After the verdict, Lewis and I sat in the courthouse parking lot for what felt like hours. Neither of us spoke at first. The weight of what had just happened, of seeing our mother led away in handcuffs, was crushing even though we knew it was necessary. Patricia and Robert gave us space, waiting by their car while we processed everything. Lewis finally broke the silence, asking if I thought she'd really get help in prison. I told him honestly that I didn't know, but that wasn't our responsibility anymore. The drive home was quiet. Sarah had to fly back to college that afternoon, but before she left, she pulled both of us into a tight hug. She whispered that she was proud of us, that we were the strongest people she knew. Coming from someone who'd barely acknowledged my existence for years, it meant everything. That night, our foster parents ordered pizza, and we ate together as a family. No one mentioned the trial or our mother. Instead, Robert talked about maybe taking a family vacation over the summer, somewhere none of us had been before. Patricia suggested the beach, and Lewis's eyes lit up. He'd never seen the ocean. The next few weeks were an adjustment. Without the constant threat of our mother's interference, we had to figure out what normal looked like. Louis stopped checking his phone obsessively, no longer expecting texts or calls from her. I stopped looking over my shoulder when walking home from school. Dr. Martinez continued working with Louis, but the sessions became less about crisis management and more about healing. She helped him understand that loving someone didn't mean accepting their abuse, that he could grieve the mother he'd wanted while still protecting himself from the mother she actually was. My grades slowly improved as I could finally focus on schoolwork without constant anxiety. My guidance counselor connected me with scholarship opportunities, saying my story of resilience would make me a strong candidate. For the first time, college felt like a real possibility rather than a distant dream. Patricia's anxiety attacks stopped completely. She weaned off her medication under her doctor's supervision, saying she felt safer than she had in months. Robert's boss welcomed him back to work full-time, and several colleagues apologized for doubting him during our mother's smear campaign. The community support continued even after the trial. Lewis's soccer coach kept checking in, making sure he was doing okay. Parents who'd witnessed our mother's behavior would stop Patricia at the grocery store to ask how we were doing. It felt like the whole neighborhood had adopted us. 3 months into our mother's sentence, we got a letter from her through our lawyer. She wanted to apologize, claimed she'd been attending AA meetings in prison and was getting help. Lewis asked if we should read it. I told him that was his choice, but I wasn't ready. He decided to wait too. Our foster family started new traditions. Sunday dinners became mandatory, no matter how busy everyone was. Robert taught Louis how to grill, something he'd always wanted to do with a son. Patricia helped me with college applications, staying up late to proofread essays and search for financial aid. Lewis made the varsity soccer team as a freshman, something almost unheard of at his school. At his first game, our whole family was there, including Sarah, who drove 3 hours from college to surprise him. When he scored his first goal, I cheered so loud I lost my voice. The stolen items our mother had planted were eventually recovered from her motel room. Patricia got her earrings back, Robert his watch. They apologized again for ever doubting me, but I told them I understood. Our mother had been a master manipulator, and they'd been trying to protect their family. One day, while cleaning out the garage, we found a box of our old belongings from before foster care. Inside were photos, including one of me carrying our mother on my back that day when I was 9. Louis stared at it for a long time before saying he was grateful I'd protected him from those memories. I turned 18 without fanfare, but our foster parents surprised me with a small party, just family and a few close friends. They gave me a laptop for college and a card signed by everyone, including Sarah. Inside, they'd all written messages about what I meant to them. I ugly cried right there at the dinner table. College acceptance letters started arriving in spring. I'd been accepted to 3 schools with partial scholarships. Patricia and Robert sat me down to discuss finances, saying they'd been saving to help with whatever the scholarships didn't cover. They wanted me to choose based on the best program, not the cheapest option. Louis struggled with the idea of me leaving for college. We'd never been apart for more than a few days. Dr. Martinez worked with us on developing healthy independence while maintaining our bond. We started practicing with weekend trips, me staying with friends while he learned to rely on our foster parents more. The family counselor from the soccer game reached out, offering to write a recommendation letter for my college applications. She'd been following our story and said my resilience and protective instincts would make me an excellent social worker if I ever considered that path. The idea planted a seed I hadn't expected. Summer arrived with a mix of excitement and anxiety. I'd chosen a college 2 hours away, close enough to visit but far enough enough to build my own life. Louis helped me shop for dorm supplies, insisting I needed at least 3 phone chargers so we could video chat whenever he wanted. Our foster parents legally adopted Sarah's suggestion of a beach vacation. For a week, we acted like any other family. Louis learned to boogie board while I read college prep books under an umbrella. Patricia and Robert held hands while walking along the shore. No one mentioned our mother or the trial or anything that had happened. One evening on the beach, Louis asked if I ever regretted taking care of him all those years. I told him it was the best thing I'd ever done, that watching him grow into the person he'd become made every sacrifice worth it. He hugged me then, the kind of little brother hug that used to embarrass him, but now came naturally. We got another letter from our mother a week before I left for college. This time, Louis wanted to read it together. It was different from what we expected. She acknowledged the harm she'd caused, said she understood why we'd testified against her. She didn't ask for forgiveness or make excuses. She just wanted us to know she was getting help. Louis asked if I believed her. I said it didn't matter what I believed. What mattered was that we were safe, we were loved, and we were building lives she couldn't destroy. He nodded and we filed the letter away. Maybe someday we'd be ready to process it, but not yet. Move-in day was emotional for everyone. Patricia cried while helping me make my bed. Robert carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs without complaint. Louis tried to reorganize my entire room, saying I needed to maximize space. Even Sarah drove down to help, bringing a care package of snacks and a photo of all of us at the beach. My roommate seemed nice, but was clearly overwhelmed by my family's enthusiasm. Louis immediately started interrogating him about his intentions and habits. I had to physically remove him from the room while apologizing. Some things about being a protective sibling would never change. As they prepared to leave, each family member pulled me aside. Robert slipped me some cash for emergencies, making me promise to call if I needed anything. Patricia hugged me for so long my roommate started looking uncomfortable. Sarah punched my shoulder and told me not to screw up. Louis was last. He handed me a wrapped present, telling me not to open it until they left. Inside was a framed photo of us from his championship game, both of us smiling with his trophy. On the back, he'd written, "Thank you for giving me a childhood. Now go live yours." I stood in my dorm window watching their car disappear. For the first time in my life, I was truly on my own. Not running away, not protecting anyone, just starting my own journey. The $2,000 I'd saved was in my bank account, but now it was for textbooks and late-night pizza runs, not escape plans. That first night, Louis called 3 times to make sure I was okay. Patricia texted asking if I'd eaten dinner. Robert sent a photo of them at Louis's favorite restaurant, my empty chair visible at the table. It should have made me sad, but instead, I felt grateful. This was what family looked like. Over the following months, I built my own life while staying connected to theirs. I joined study groups, made friends, even went to a few parties. Louis visited once a month, always with care packages from Patricia and updates on his soccer season. Our foster parents came for Parents' Weekend, proudly wearing matching college sweatshirts. During winter break, I came home to find they'd kept my room exactly as I'd left it. Louis had won several more soccer matches and was being scouted by college teams. Patricia had started volunteering with foster youth support groups. Robert had gotten a promotion at work. Life had continued, but my place in it remained. We spent Christmas together, our first without any drama or fear. Sarah brought her boyfriend to meet the family, warning him extensively about Louis's protective streak. We exchanged presents and told stories and acted like any other family because that's what we'd become. Our mother served her full sentence without early release. We got occasional updates through our lawyer but chose not to engage. She'd made her choices, and we'd made ours. The family we'd built was stronger than anything she could threaten now. As I write this, I'm finishing my freshman year of college. Louis is thriving in high school, still texting me daily updates about his life. Our foster parents, who I now just call mom and dad, are planning another beach vacation for summer. Sarah's graduating next month, and we're all going to watch her walk across that stage. Sometimes I think about that scared 12-year-old sleeping in a playground, wondering where life would take him. I wish I could tell him that everything would work out, that the family he'd find would be worth all the pain, that protecting Louis would lead to being protected in return. But mostly, I'm just grateful. For Louis's unwavering love, for parents who chose us even when it was hard, for a sister who accepted us as brothers, for a community that rallied around us, for the chance to be a regular college student worrying about finals instead of survival. Our mother was wrong about one thing. I don't owe her anything. Everything good in my life came from the love I gave and received, not from her. And that love, the kind that builds families from broken pieces, that's the only debt worth paying forward.